and top
Tom, welcome
security.
back.
Thank you. Maybe it's my alter ego.
We've all got one of those right now, don't we?
Well, it's a dark one. If that's
Maybe it's the FTC watching.
oh, that must
Oh, it
be
could
what it is.
be.
Yes.
I saw. I was just. It was just in the news. I know this is totally off topic, but the FTC is suing Microsoft for their Activision
Correct.
acquisition. Yeah.
And they're also suing Facebook for their acquisition of Supernatural. I can't remember the name of the company, but Supernatural is an exercise app, and the FTC is saying that that Facebook should be building their own to go into competition with Supernatural instead of buying them. So
Well, I'm not familiar with Supernatural, but I can relate to some of these businesses just becoming so large and strong. It's a little scary sometimes.
It's been interesting watching the Twitter files. Hey,
now we're back.
finally
Yeah.
figured it out.
What? Yeah. One the FTC needs to break up is the Ticketmaster debacle.
Yes.
Hmm.
Let's talk about convenience fees.
Yes.
That's my favorite. I love the convenience fee when I buy something from Ticketmaster.
Absolutely. I know. Tom, do you charge a convenience fee?
I do not. I do not. Even though I have a red phone after my name on LinkedIn and people call me 24 hours a day, I do not charge a convenience fee.
Wow. Do you get a lot of phone calls from that?
I do get some phone calls, yes.
That's awesome.
I had a dealer call me. I answer my phone no matter where I am. My wife and I got married a year ago and just took our honeymoon, and a dealer from California called me at I think it was 4 o'clock California time, which was midnight in Rome on my honeymoon, and I answered the phone, and
That
you know,
what
off we
what
went
pos- what what possessed you to answer the phone on your honeymoon like that?
because I answer my phone.
Too many years in the dealership.
So I
Yeah,
answer my
really.
phone. I answer my phone no matter what time it is and what's going on. So that's why I'm the red phone. Is when there's a problem. Sometimes people call when there's a problem, and so I try to answer my phone unless I'm on the phone or in the shower. Hard to answer the phone in the shower, but other than that, I
And
answer my phone.
it sounds like you married the right woman. If she
Yeah,
Puts
has
up
no
with that.
issues with
Yeah.
that.
that's right. That's right.
So what happened with this? What happened with this FTC? What? Why the 6 month extension? I sort of had a feeling that may happen, just because. I mean, you were hearing stuff about it. Of course, we've had you on before, um, but you just think there'd be some more buzz around it. Maybe they're hoping to squeeze in an NADA to conference beforehand to get some more, some more buzz around it, or to get it in front of more dealerships to be aware of it.
Yeah, it's hard to know. The extension, the press release said because resources were difficult to find for some dealerships, and they cited a labor shortage. Uh, I really don't know what the reason why. I can just tell you what the press release said.
Okay.
I think but it's good for dealers, and they need to get to work and start this important work because it is arduous. It doesn't help sell cars, so it's frustrating from that perspective. As a client just said to me this week when I was in Montana, he said, "Well, okay, I'll just stop selling cars and I'll comply with this." Okay, got it. And he's right. He's right. It is
Right.
frustrating, and it's very detailed and requires really a deep dive to get it all right. And when I say a deep dive, I was at a dealership in Delaware, and they hadn't really started, and I got to them at about 1 o'clock on a Monday, and met till 6, and then started the next morning at 9, and by 2 the following day. So like basically 10 hours of solid meetings with every single department manager and their IT folks. It took us 10 hours to get them moving in the right direction where they were able to, kind of wrap their hands around it, figure out next steps, and start to proceed down the line. So it is a difficult thing to comply with.
What's the level of seriousness that you're seeing the dealerships take? Maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being most serious.
I'll I'll give you a 1 and a 10. Uh, how's that? I talked to a dealership who said, "Oh, well, the owner says the NADA is gonna get that thrown away, so we're not gonna do anything on that."
Yeah, you can always go by that, right?
Yeah.
So you can always go by that. It doesn't matter. This law's been around since 2003. Uh, so that's one. And then, two examples is the ones I just gave you, which is the ones who are just digging in and getting done what they need to get done. So it's
Mhm.
but it requires concentration just like anything else. The different part about this is, in my opinion, that in the past, dealers have been able to basically write a check and get in compliance. And this is just not one of those things. This requires, good old fashioned shoe leather. And there's just some walking around and thinking about it and putting in policies and how are we going to handle these things. So there's no
Mm.
one thing that you can do to knock the whole thing out. Now, there are companies out there who have software solutions, and even they will tell you that it's only 30 to 40% of the total, that if you use their total solution and use it to its full extent, you're still only going to be 40% compliant, which is better than being no percent compliant. But um, that's I, I think that's kind of the range.
Well, Tom,
Yeah,
that's
40% sounds like there's still a lot of holes.
A
well.
lot of holes.
It would be good to give some background on what that all means. So we could take a step back, and I know we covered this when you were last on, but what are the FTC rules that are coming into effect in June now? They were supposed to come into effect today, but
Mhm.
they've been extended for 6 months. So yay, we've got some more time to work on these. But if we can go through and just cite what they are, and you mentioned that they go all the way back to 2003. Then what's new, what's yeah.
Sure, sure. So I'll kind of take that from the top. So one very important thing is I shouldn't be able to walk into the dealership, walk up to the desk, pick up a whole armful of folders and walk out the front door. Uh, and that's a problem. So there's still dealerships that I go to that there's personally identifiable information, or PII, that is all over the desks. And the definition changed in October of 2021 for the new law, when this new law or regulations were passed, I should say, that the definition of PII has now changed. So the definition now includes home address, cell phone number, and email address. So basically, an RO that has a name on it.
Yeah.
If somebody inquires through a service scheduler, that's now considered PII. It has to be encrypted, and I'll come back to that in a few minutes. But let's start with making sure there's no personal information left out on desks, computers left on with Route 1 open where I could go in and see people's credit information and all the approvals or denials. Let's That's nothing's new from 2003 as far as that goes. What is new is what is PII, and that's changed the definition of what has to be protected. As I said, now repair orders need to be protected. Can't just leave repair orders out. You can't anything that might have customer information you can't leave out. So
That's
that's a big
difficult. That that's difficult, especially in the service department.
that's
I
a
mean,
big
You may
good.
change.
have to have
I mean,
closed door
repair
office.
orders are always laying around. Heck, I
Repair
remember
orders are
when I wrote service, the repair order went up into the text box, and they were just hanging out there. I mean, anyone could walk by, and I don't know why anyone would, but we say that about a lot of different things.
I mean, you might have
yes,
to
Drew.
adopt
I've
a.
seen a service writer's desk recently. Sorry.
I was going to say, like the most of them are at a tower where things are just strewn about. But
Hmm.
there's some highline service departments where the service writers have glass areas, much like a sales
That's what
manager
we
might
have.
have, and that might be
Right.
kind of physical change that
Yeah,
might need to occur.
yeah.
Correct.
We've got separate offices, um, concrete wall between the two, and then glass doors all the way around. Something else, as you walk into dealerships, one thing that we did was put a security code lock system on the F&I office.
Correct. That's a great one, Jeff. And even more important to add to that, if you haven't done this yet, it's a simple fix. Put a automatic door closer on the F&I office,
Yeah.
so that
Yep.
when they walk out, the door closes and they have to either put the security code to get back in. Some dealerships have thumbprints. Some dealerships have badges. Anything that will protect all that information in the F&I office is super important as far as this goes. But yeah, Alex, getting back, I'm sorry, Jeff, you have a question, or I'll get back to Alex's question.
Well, I was just thinking about the badges. I mean, one thing with that, anyone could steal a badge. It's a lot easier to steal a badge or grab a badge off somebody or off their desk than what it would be to come up with a code, obviously a fingerprint. Um,
Yeah,
so
Tom
I'm
Cruise does it all the
surprised.
time.
It's Yeah, I'm surprised since they're getting so tight with the regulations that they would even allow a badge entry.
Well, I mean, it says you have to secure the information. How you secure it is you. So that's
Gotcha.
personal choice.
Hmm.
Okay.
So that's the PII side. What about there's some pieces there about data itself in the digital space, right?
Correct. So in the digital space, data. Drew said the code's always 000.
Yeah, or it's like my
Or
luggage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
there you go. On the data side, any information that contains the PII now has to be encrypted. And it has to be encrypted both at rest and in transit. So any place that customer information is sitting there has to be encrypted. Anytime you're going between, from your website to your CRM, that now is in transit and that has to be encrypted. So this is a fundamental change with how things are done because in the auto business, as you well know, Alex, everything in the auto business is done through ADF XML format, and
Hmm.
it's not encryptable, as I understand it. I'm not a
Not when
techie
it's sent
guy.
as an email.
Yeah, not when it's sent as an email. And so you can't now, and I'm glad you brought that up. You can't now send STIPs through your email to your manager. So if you're a salesman on the floor and you get a pay stub or whatever it is, uh, you can't then forward it to your manager because
Hmm.
it's not encrypted and now it contains PII. One clever dealer I have thought to, instead of doing that, to use the email to fax issue so that you can fax it to the desk. Maybe the desk will have one of those fax numbers like eFax and get the information that way because a fax is encrypted, which sounds crazy. Drew says use WhatsApp for STIPs. I don't know if WhatsApp is encrypted or
And
not,
you might
but
as well use TikTok too in that case.
that's what I thought.
I mean, at least the Americans won't see it, but the Chinese will get
That's right. That's right. Well, they already know.
it. Right.
Um, So it's important that you think through, okay, where is all of the PII at the dealership? And probably the best way to do that, other than physically walking around and looking, is going to your payables department and have your payables department write a list of anything internet related, customer related, any of that information, so that you can start creating a list of all the places that have customer information. And then from there, you can start figuring out what you need to do about each one of those things.
That's good. I'm going to take that little timestamp down. It was a good run there. Thank you, Tom. We'll clip that piece.
I know. Every time Tom's on, I'm making notes.
Yep. Yeah. So, all right. So we've got new definitions for PII and
Right.
new ways that data needs to be handled. And then the other component of this is on the products that can actually be offered, right?
No, that's a different proposed regulation that hasn't become law yet. Nobody knows whether it will. I happen to think it will, but the last vote for that, Jeff says, a cheaper solution is getting a coder ring. Not one of those. Sometimes it works. It just depends on your Wi-Fi signal. Uh,
Drink your
so
Ovaltine.
Yeah.
that's right. So I forgot your question. Sorry.
So what I guess really one of the things I was bringing up is when you talk about the F&I products that might be
Right.
like banned. What's the right word for it? But go ahead.
Yes. So the last time, as I recall, that the FTC voted on this, they voted 4-1 that it was going to pass. Then, as of September 12th, I believe, if you had any comments that you wanted to submit publicly, so that the FTC will then consider those public comments, and after that, they'll do a final ruling. Because the vote was 4-1 from all the policy wonks that I talked to, they say that it's unlikely that anything's going to get reversed on that, because it was a 4-1, and no matter what your politics are and how many are Democrats and how many are Republicans of the 5 commissioners, 4-1 is going to pass. So I think it will pass. Now, what NADA, NIADA, RVDA, the Recreational Vehicle Dealers Association, the Marine one, which I forget what theirs, whether they decide to take that on in court or not, that's a different story. But other than that, at the time the FTC decides that, and I believe we should be hearing about that in the next month or two, as I understand it, then it will become law. I think much like Gramm Leach Bliley, they gave everybody a year to be in compliance, and I think that will happen too, and that will have implications for basically for the not only the dealers but the website providers. If that whole law has changed, and I've read some about it, I haven't drilled into it all the way down to the bottom of the earth, but it's going to change the way that products are presented, and it's going to change how website providers will serve that information up to people who are shopping online. So it really will have a ripple effect as to everything that we do. In addition, the way it was written, it means that we're going to have additional paperwork that we didn't previously have. They say it's to streamline it, but the way it was written last time I read it, it's going to create additional paperwork that customers are going to have to sign to agree that they're going to agree that they might agree, or essentially that.
When was the last time the federal government streamlined something?
Right.
It usually just
only
usually
when we're
causes
sending
more
money
work.
to Ukraine, I think, does it get streamlined.
True.
Yeah. So all right. So back to the FTC the safeguards rules. Um, so, what do you think is the most vulnerable part of the dealership? Is it the papers strewn about on the showroom or at the service writer's desk, or is there an electronic component that also is something we need to be really aware of?
So when I walk into a dealership and start working on this from the ground up, it really is a ground up issue. And it's not only not having passwords on desk blotters to protect customer information, which I still see some post-it post-it notes that have logins and passwords.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Often, often CRMs. If the name of your dealership is Johnson Motors, then on some CRMs everybody uses the login name as Johnson, and then the password is always Johnson1. So that's that's a problem. So each person has to have their own login and password, and then somebody has to monitor and set up the fact that a nefarious salesman can't download 20,000 names on a thumb drive and then go sell it, right? And so the access has to be carefully contained. And so a good place to start is making sure that that's happening, that everybody has their own password. It's a pain in the neck because the salespeople turn over. Somebody has to be in charge of assigning them a new name, a new password to the CRM, to the DMS if they're in that, and all the rest of the apps. So that's I guess kind of part one, Alex. Part two, I would say, is making sure that there is MFA because that's a new requirement as of June 9th of 23 that you have to have multi-factor authentication and um, and have MFA to protect the customer information. Um, and as Drew says, you know, and I mentioned this when I'm in there, that computers should have automatic log offs, and they say why? I said because I've seen before where a janitorial crew will steal information, steal money, steal names, and so it's got to
Wow.
be you've got to be protected from threats, and according to the FTC, it's both internal and external, and that would be an internal threat. And so you have to think through all these things and have a strategy. And by June of 23, you have to have a written risk assessment. So one of the changes is you were already supposed to have a risk assessment by January 10th of this year. As of June 9th of next year, you have to have that written. It has to be a written risk assessment.
Okay.
As of January 10th, you were already supposed to have a written information security program as to how you are going to safeguard customer information. That was something that should have been done already by January 10th of 2022. So that's kind of a long answer to your question.
Well, it's
What? Yeah. What? I don't know if this coincides with this, but what happens? Because we had this happen once many years ago, where a salesperson quits, they go into the CRM, and I guess they feel as if all their customers that they sold cars to were their customers, and downloaded all the customer information onto a drive and took it with them to the next dealership. How do you prevent that, and how does that fall into something like that, or is that totally separate? Where that's something on the dealership level, and you get a lawyer involved.
Well, I think as with most problems, there's not just one solution. So I think you have to attack it a couple different ways, Jeff. Number
Mhm.
one, I think you have to have a policy in your employee guidebook that all the data while they're at the dealership belongs to the dealership, that they are not entitled to anything, that make that very clear through your guidebook. Number two,
Mhm.
through permissions like we were just talking about, that they don't have access to download anything they can access. Um, Excuse me, of course, you can't prevent them from going and single printing every single customer if they're that ambitious and they want to call their customers, but setting up the permissions so they can't easily go click, 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 and then download all the information. So you
Okay,
got
that
to
makes sense.
monitor
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And having some oversight so that when the employee has gone, that they are taken out of all of the electronic media so that they can't get in after they've been at another dealership. And I've seen that happen too, where somebody leaves, they forget to take them out of the CRM, and he's over at another dealership happily typing away, pulling customer information from the old employer, and having that
Yeah.
problem occur for the old dealership.
That's something that's quite common on the vendor side. Salespeople at one website company, for example, will go get a job as a salesperson at another website company. They'll take the whole list, client list with them. Yep.
Tom, I'm
So good for
curious.
goodness sake.
Yeah, I think first off, I think Drew probably had quite a few cups of coffee this morning. Uh,
No, I feel like he should just be on this show with us.
I know, just join us, Drew. um, which he's always got an open invitation. Um, have you looked at some of the larger vendors and taken inventory of some of these, whether it's a website provider? Earlier, you mentioned online service scheduling, digital retailing, plug-in tools for dealership websites. Have you had the opportunity, or would it make sense around, taking inventory of which providers are, I guess, already up to date with all this security stuff?
Yeah, so I don't know which ones are up to date, and there are so many out there that it's hard to get
Yeah.
your arms around that. But I can tell you as an example, even CDK, as of earlier this year, I don't know where they are in this process, but earlier, like April, May, or June, right around I think when they were being bought out by Apollo, they didn't have an MFA um, application to be able to get in. So the company is,
Huh.
I think they were sold for 8.1 billion. A company that big who didn't have MFA, I think this caught a lot of companies flat-footed, with them being one of them. And
Mhm.
so I see various, excuse me, various vendors in various states. But one of the vendors that dealers have to be concerned about, according to the FTC, is that the manufacturers are considered a vendor. And so, according to the FTC, if your manufacturer is not, or any of your vendors are not complying with this, you're supposed to find another vendor. So I've been asked multiple times, what do I do if Toyota or Subaru or Chevrolet or whoever it is isn't complying? And my answer for that is you need to make sure that when you're RDRing a car, when you're doing warranty submissions, that has to be encrypted as well, because you're transmitting customer information. And what do you do if they're not encrypting information? Well, clearly you're not getting another manufacturer. But I think, to be prudent, I think, once a month you need to call up the manufacturer, say, hey, what are you guys doing about this? How are you handling it? Document that, however you're going to document it, whether it's in an electronic medium or whether it's on paper, and follow up once a
Mhm.
month, so that if you do have a problem and the FTC comes in, that you can say, hey, look, I am complying. I obviously can't get another vendor because this is my manufacturer, but I call them once a month. Here's what they're telling me their status is. Here's what they're telling me they're going to handle that. And I think that would be satisfactory, assuming you're complying with all the rest. If you're not
Mhm.
complying with all the rest, then it really isn't going to make any difference. But if you've got open items of which they expect you to have open items, it's a matter of whether you're being willfully compliant or willfully non-compliant at that point. So I think that's an important distinction when you're thinking about whether you should get rid of the vendor or shouldn't you. Are they trying to comply? Are they giving you a timeline for compliance? Hey, I'll be in compliance by June, by the deadline, or it may take me a month or two after that, that kind of
Mhm.
thing. But it is important that to note that as of January 10th of this year, you are already supposed to have a vendor management program where you are monitoring what the vendors were doing, and the FTC calls it overseeing your service providers. So you're already supposed to have been doing that, and you're supposed to have taken reasonable steps to comply with that by now.
Huh.
Mhm.
So, how would a dealer go about doing this and starting to to Jeff's question earlier, maybe asking this a little differently, but how could they inventory their vendors? How should they approach them?
How should they approach each of the
Call
vendors once they know
call
that they have customer information?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, Drew, OEM is a service provider or a vendor. You call them whatever you want. But the information has to go back. The information going back and forth needs to be encrypted. As I had mentioned, I think it's important to start by walking around the dealership, number one. Number two, checking with your payables department and have them create a list, and then go to your department heads, number three, and saying, okay, where is our customer information residing? Where does it go? Is it, where is it in transit? Where is it in rest? And I think if you do that with each of your department managers, have a quick 10-minute conversation with them, take a look at your payables list, I think you'll knock out at least 95% of it.
And then do you
So I
need to
get
reach
you've got
out to each vendor and ask them how they're encrypting data, or have them sign
Correct.
something that
Now,
identifies a dealership, or what is?
you're going to need to get something that in writing from them. That's another June deadline.
We've
That
been
you have
filling
to have
out a
some.
lot of these forms lately, so
That's good. I'm glad
yep,
to hear it.
yep.
Um, but yeah, I mean, so you have to have something from the service provider stating that they are encrypting the data, that they are protecting the customer information, and then the dealerships are required to oversee that. And once a year, they're required to go back to those vendors and make sure that everything is still in order. So there's an audit function to it as well. Jeff, you were going to say something. I think I cut you off.
Yeah, I forget what it was, but I've got another question queued up. It's a little bit different channel than what we're speaking to now, so I may just save it for a little later.
Okay.
I was just thinking about all the different places that customer information would be: credit applications, deal folders, CRM, DMS, all your vendors, of course, F&I offices, all your, you know, any office,
Any
sales
office.
desks.
Anything that touches a lead or generates a
Yeah,
lead, because you're going to have a lead backend in like cars.com's backend.
email.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, this is a weird one, but and I run into this from time to time. Would the dealership be responsible? I would think they would be responsible for this. A car gets traded in and it's got their old insurance card in there. Or car gets traded in and you pull up the navigation and it's got the customer's address and point of interest in there. It's got their phone
Yeah.
numbers. Maybe they forgot to delete all the contacts that was uploaded to the memory in the vehicle. Of course, with a bunch of your new vehicles, that's always an option, especially you got CarPlay or any of the like infotainment systems. Who's responsible for that? Does that also fall on the dealership?
It does. It falls on the
Hmm.
dealership. And so the dealership has to have a policy and a procedure to purge those cars of that information, and they should be doing that now. They don't. There's still, uh, I hear tales all the time of former owners
Mm-hmm.
getting phone call from the new owners asking, "Well, when was the last time you put new tires on the
Yeah.
car," and stupid stuff like that. but you have
Yep.
to clear out those infotainment systems. And in fact, there's uh, uh, um, an app that does that. It's called Privacy for Cars, and they have a whole
Okay.
procedure that you go through in order to clear that information.
Interesting. Yeah, some of them's got you go into the settings, you can do like a hard reset. And it'll clear everything out as well. But I wasn't aware of the app. What's the name of the app again?
It's called Privacy for Cars. Privacy, the
Okay.
number 4, cars.com. And tell Andrea I
Perfect.
said hello.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, he's got patented technology on how he's doing it. I'm not going to try to describe it. I'll let him do it. Maybe he can be your next guest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of that, while
I
we're
always wondered if if car gets traded in, you've got the customer's address, point of interest, you know where they live, and they also forgot to wipe out their remote garage door opener from their HomeLink system in their vehicle. You got
That's a
to, I
problem
mean,
too.
that's got to happen all the time.
I would think so. Just pull right in, go and knock on the door for dinner. Hey, we're here to visit. And what are we? I hope we're having fried chicken because it's my favorite.
I just thought you'd want one more ride with your old car.
That's it. Come on, let's go for a ride.
So,
By the way, how many accidents was it in? Because the dealer told me there were none.
Yeah, exactly.
well, if somebody
Is
showed up
there
at my house like that, it would be getting it its first right there.
what about shred bins? Is there going to be any like set amount? You got to have X amount of shred bins per square foot?
Well, shred bin, it's a good question, Jeff. So shred bins are important in my opinion because what are you doing with your unfunded deals? What are you doing with STIPs once the sales manager scans and uploads them, hopefully in an encrypted way? What do you do with all that information, and then how long do you keep it? And I get asked that question a lot. And my answer for that is you should be keeping the information in that shred bins according to the Equal Credit Opportunity Act
Mm-hmm.
to prove that you haven't discriminated against someone. And then the IRS has certain reference points to that, also to that information. And then you've also got obligations under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, the FCRA, when somebody comes back to you and says, hey, I didn't who are you and why did you do an inquiry into my credit? And then and I had this happen hundreds of times when I was the dealership. And it's like, well, you were here with your nephew 30 days ago. You were looking at a Volkswagen Jetta. Oh yeah, that's right. Right. But unless and it's amazing how many people forget, and if you can't go back and pull that folder and tell them, then you might have a legal problem on your hands. So those shred bins are important. Hopefully the information isn't getting shredded. Hopefully they're being taken to a secure location and boxed up. And I recommend boxing them, doing it once a month. That way you have the January or 2023 box. So if somebody comes in and says, you inquired on January 20, you can pull that box out, or maybe pull 3 boxes, the December, the January, and the February, and you can find the paperwork with no problem. So I think it's important to have that. And as long as it's accessible, as long as it's locked, because you don't want a shred bin sitting in the middle of the showroom that's not locked. And they really shouldn't be in the middle of the showroom. They really should be in a manager's office. But I have seen them in showrooms. There are better locations for them, though.
well, I mean, just having
Good
it
point.
behind a locked door might not be enough these days, right? Just we're seeing all
Right.
sorts of fun stuff in Mar-a-Lago of late about that, but
Only if it has confidential written on it.
oh yes.
Or strictly confidential or super confidential. For your eyes only, Jeff.
Yes.
For your eyes only, Alex.
So, Tom,
Alex.
there's a reason we have you on here. It's because you specialize in this stuff. And if anyone watching wanted to bring an expert on to help them become more compliant and get through these FTC safeguard changes, how could they get a hold of you? And I'm going to ask again later just to make sure that we get you plugged at least twice in here.
Good, thank you. I have a phone which I answer, even if I'm on my
No
honeymoon,
matter what.
uh, unless I'm in the shower. So you can reach me on my cell at 757-434-7656, or my email address is tomk, as in Tom Kline, tomk at bettervantagepoint.com, or through LinkedIn messaging. Those are all good ways to get me.
Do we have to encrypt this
Do you,
now?
Only if you send me your date of birth and your
do
Yeah.
you on your website? That's what is it? Bettervantagepoint.com.
correct.
Do you have any type of material or PDFs dealerships could download just to maybe, take inventory or at least give them an idea of what all is going to be involved in this? That way they can then just give you a call and have you take care of it.
So it's not on my website. It is on my YouTube channel. So
Okay.
if you Google Better Vantage Point, or search Better Vantage Point in YouTube, you'll see various shows that come up, and there's one or two that will walk a dealer through exactly kind of having a roadmap of what to do and things to think about when they're thinking about complying.
Yeah, I can see this. I'm pretty sure you're probably familiar with a system called Complete.
Hmm.
A lot of dealerships use that, and we always got to go in. We got to take tests every 6 months, every year.
Get that
We
sexual
got to sign
harassment
all the.
training, man.
I know you
Yeah,
love that.
yeah. I'm in the middle of that one right now. Every time I almost finish it, we lose internet connection. I got to take it over, but it's like my fourth or fifth time. Um, I can only imagine. This is going to add so much more to a Complete, more tests, more videos to watch to make sure everyone is following the directions, signing off on it. I would eventually say you probably even recommend some type of 6 month plan that every 6 months you go through the checklist again and you know make sure everything's is up to snuff and working the way it's supposed to be working. Everyone's doing everything that they're supposed to be doing. Is that what you would recommend? Like every 6 months or every year?
Well, the requirements for the new regulations is that every employee at the dealership, and I always get asked about lot attendants and technicians. Does that include lot attendants and technicians? Yes, it includes lot attendants and technicians. Every employee has to be educated every year on this stuff. And so some of those apps that I mentioned have educational components similar to Complete, where you go in, you watch a video, you might do a 5 question quiz, or you might just watch a video, and you can't fast forward through the video. They make it so you can't. And so
Wow.
that's part of the mandatory requirements going forward. So some of these apps, for example, have 12 modules. So if you just do one module a month, 10 minutes worth of video and 5 minutes worth of test taking or whatever, that's, I think, the most robust way to go about this.
Okay. Okay.
Hmm.
Fines. Is there I don't think we've touched on fines.
Well,
What's the fines per Go ahead.
actually that's an interesting one you bring up, Jeff. So we've been the FTC safeguard rules and everything has been out there for at least 6 months. We've known this thing was coming. We've covered this here on Refresh Friday before. It's been a big topic by NADA, NIADA, all the groups. It's been in automotive news and whatnot. And you would think that you would hear from some of the technology companies about what they're doing to make changes to work with other technology companies for encrypting the data specifically. And I'm coming back to your fines part in a second, Jeff. Um, but I haven't heard a thing. The CRM companies in particular have been very quiet. And I have to wonder if there's a tactic here in that uh, do you wait for court cases to see what the real, the real sticking points of these rules and how hard they're going to enforce it will be? Or because this could be a major investment, a major money spent to comply, but I don't know.
So the NADA did a study and said that the average cost to comply with this was I think it was the number was $277,000 a year. Now that was
Wow.
before the FTC changed the requirements to have a chief information security officer or a CISO. You no longer have to have a CISO, you just have to have a designated individual. And in all the dealers I'm working with right now, most of those people are either the CFO or the owner. They just say, I'm going to be the designated individual, and that's that. Can't get any higher than me. I'm the buck stops with me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I think that number is way high. I think that the FTC, I'm certain that the FTC has started enforcement actions outside of the auto business. I use the Cafe Press situation. You can Google FTC Cafe Press action. I don't remember how much they were fined, but Cafe Press was fined to be for lackadaisical data security. And there's another case of an educational company that I'm forgetting off the top of my head that just came out in the last 60 days that again is outside the automotive business, but they are enforcing data security issues. And so I think that you will see increased enforcement. However, I think the enforcement will start not because the FTC is going to start knocking on dealers' doors on June the 10th, although I don't know because I'm not the FTC. That's my disclaimer. But I think what happens is I think that typically problems start like this when you're not resolving your customer complaints. And when you don't resolve your customer complaints and everybody complains to a regulator, they come into your business. And then once they're in, they're like, oh, by the way, we want to see what you're doing to be compliant with the safeguard rules. I'm
Mm.
not sure they're going to have a SWAT team of auditors to go out on June the 10th and start looking. I think it's unlikely because that's just usually not how it happens. How it happens is you have a group of customers complain, the dealership doesn't do anything about it, and then the regulators are off to the races. Two good recent examples of that: Napleton Automotive, I think in May of this year, was fined $10 million. And that was for, without getting in all the specifics of that, because the customers complained and they didn't fix those customer complaints. And Passport Automotive, also the same, they were fined 3.380 million because they had unhappy customers without going into the merits, whether it's true or not. And I don't know because I don't work for Passport or Napleton, but I can just tell you from reading the FTC press releases what they say. When they say they have all these unhappy customers, that's the way it usually starts.
Cafe Press was almost a half a million.
So there you go.
Yeah. And then for each violation, wasn't like over $40,000 per violation?
It's $46,517 per violation. Don't ask me how they came up with that number, but
How do you remember it?
yeah, but well, this is what I do, right? So, but the FTC left the language vague because it doesn't say. I think it says per violation or per occurrence, one or the other, but they don't define what a violation or an occurrence is. And so, if you have 10 names as an example, is that $465,000? or is that one occurrence?
One
And
violation, yeah.
then and so this always also leads into a conversation about cyber insurance. And if if the dealership doesn't have cyber insurance, I highly recommend you buy cyber insurance, but make sure you
Mm,
read your policy. As I have a client, two clients actually, who have a certain insurance company, and it turns out that there are caps on the number of individuals that are covered under that cyber policy. So just to give you some rough numbers, rough math is an average dealership, I'd say, easily has 200,000 names in their CRM and in their DMS. Easily. Most small
mhm.
stores have twice that in my experience. So if you have a data breach and one of the resolutions is you have to pay for credit monitoring, like a life lock for the customer to make sure that they're protected, that's about $8-9 a month. So if you do the quick math, that's 100 a year. So 200,000 times 100 a year is $20 million.
That's a chunk of
So
change.
$20 million, it's a chunk of change. And in recently, when I've read these cyber policies, they had caps on them of 100,000. So if you had more than 100, if you had more than 100,000 names, it's a problem.
Yeah,
It's a problem. So that has to be when, if you have cyber insurance, I encourage you to go look at your policy, see what they say. There's a
good
lot,
point.
there's a lot more to dig through there, but at a minimum, make sure that you have enough coverage in your own opinion. And that'll depend on what your risk tolerance is and how much risk you're willing to take on.
What was the
Great point.
your way of explaining this one? So think about how many assets you have. What's your business worth?
Sure. So when you think about a cyber breach or any catastrophic problem, do this quick math in your head. Take your land and building, add your used cars and your parts inventory to that number, and then add to that whatever you think your blue sky is worth. And at a franchise dealership, I used to say that number was between 15 and 25 million. I speak at a lot of CPAs have 20 group meetings. And so I was at a CPA 20 group meeting speaking to 20 CPAs who do books for car dealers. And I said, well, what do you guys think about that? And one guy in the back said, you are so low, it's ridiculous. I said, okay. So I said, what's the average? He said, and I don't know this to be true, but he said 35 million is the average. So if you have a cyber breach or any catastrophic problem at your dealership, you're putting, call it 20 to 35 million dollars on the line, and you don't want to be in
Hmm.
a position where the plaintiff attorneys sue you and you are potentially handing the keys to your business to them because you didn't take the proper precautions.
What a mess.
Not scary at all.
Yeah.
Not scary at all.
Well, Tom,
I
one
know.
more plug for Better Vantage Point. So, and if you don't mind, this time, like you're helping out with the safeguard rules. You're
Right.
helping out with just general compliance overall, and then you're also quite a resource for renegotiating or trying to figure out what kind of insurance you do have, right?
Correct.
Mm,
So risk at a dealership comes in many forms, and so one of the things I do is uncover where the risks in the dealership are. As an example, I was at a store this week, and they have a rental car program of a certain manufacturer, and I went in and I said, "Well, let's look at the policy guidelines." And they said, well, we're good on this issue. And I said, okay, that's fine. I want to see the policy guidelines. So we read through the policy guidelines, and what was important, they went through their whole thing, how they input the information, and there's $10 million of coverage, of which I knew they weren't certain of that. But once we pulled up the guidelines, And I said, and I read through the guidelines and I highlighted, I said, I'm really worried about this. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, what this says is, I know you're getting the ID card, but this says you have to verify the insurance on each customer. And he said, are you telling me that without verifying we don't have any coverage? I said, not unless you have rental coverage on your garage policy, of which that can be unusual. So you have no coverage if you're not verifying, and this particular dealership wasn't verifying their, when they were handing out loaner cars. Digging into the operations and making sure you know how the insurance works and what happens if you have an accident and what you're supposed to do and what the limits of insurance are, and are they enough, to your point, are they enough to cover the assets of the dealership, and if they're not enough, are you okay taking that risk on? So I take a look at every aspect of the dealership and make sure that there's a procedure in place to bubble these problems to the top. And then, of course, we do the ultimate risk transference, which is what you want to do, is having insurance to cover all those perils. Unfortunately, there are so many perils that we talk about that not all of them are insurable, or the ones that, where your holes are, the exposure is so low or so rare that the dealer says, I get it, I hear that I'm exposed, I'm okay with it, I'll argue about it in court, or I'll do something else with it. So my job when I go into a store, and this is under continuous improvement, Alex, it's not just something that you can go and do for a month and I'm all done. Right? I mean, as an example, I think I identified between 30 and 50 issues that we have to work on at the store that I was at this week, and then it's going to require everybody to dig in and see how we're going to handle those, or is the dealer comfortable with that risk, or does he not care about it? Some don't care. Some are like, I got that. That's not my concern. But oh my gosh, I didn't know, as an example, if there's no weather aggregate over your physical damage coverage, and you have 300 cars on the ground and your deductible's 2,000, that you're going to have to write a check for $600,000 if you have a weather problem. And can you afford to write that $600,000 check? Right? If you have a weather aggregate, that means, let's say it's 100,000. That means once you write a check for 100,000, you're done. Otherwise, if you have every car in the lot that's destroyed, then you're going to be writing a $600,000 check. Can you do that? Can you afford that? Is that something that you're worried about or not? And some dealers say that'll never happen here. I point to something happened, I think it was last year, dealership up in Northern Virginia. It was near a stream, and it rained hard or whatever. 35 or 33 cars got washed down the river and totaled.
Yikes.
I mean, things happen. Things happen all the time. So it's important to know where your holes are, recognize what your risk is, and then be comfortable with that risk. So my job is to identify the risk, make sure you know that it's there, and then try to find ways to ameliorate it, but at least make sure that that you know it's there and what the potentiality is for those kinds of problems.
One of the things that I've always appreciated about you, Tom, is that you're not a nag about it. Like, it's not that sometimes somebody comes in. I've had some CPAs who've done this. Like, you must, you must, and just like, no, this is my life, not so. You're not that way.
Make the recommendation and let me
Yeah.
do it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's all for the dealer's consideration, right? My job is to bring it to light, say here's some options of what you can do about it, and then whatever the decision is their decision, and so I've done my job as long as I pointed out what it is they can do about it and where,
Yep.
how they can head it off. So it's their, when their feet hit the floor in the morning, it's their risk. Ultimately, it's not mine.
Tom, you've got to be a busy man.
It's I stay busy, right?
No doubt. No doubt.
Well, Tom, I think we got you back on the calendar for June 9th when
Great.
these rules are supposed to go out again. Hopefully, maybe we get another extension. Who knows? Um, but we will be talking when they come into effect.
Very good. It's
All right.
great to be here. Thanks. Thank you both for having me.
Always.
Yes, Tom. Thank you so much.
See you later.
All right.
Bye
Have a
bye.
great weekend.